which are based in some countries in Africa and Asia. And we collaborate together to work on issues of public safety and justice concerns, which are very relevant in today's time of COVID, when you have unprecedented powers being given to the leadership during these emergency times. And we are going to be exploring some dimensions of those issues and how they're affecting citizen rights today. Our organizations, our secretariat is based in Nigeria in the Clean Foundation. Our other member organizations who are partners to this webinar series are the ICJK, that is the International Commission of Jurists, the Kenya chapter, APCOF, which is the African Civilian Oversight, African Policing Civilian Oversight Forum located in South Africa. And we have from Asia, the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, located in its base campus in Mumbai. So we are the 4 organizations that are partnering to hold these series. And I'm just going to forewarn you today, both our locations in India, in North India and in Nigeria, are having a storm and tempest and rains brewing. So we may some of us may just keep getting cut on and off. So please bear with us. Today's program, today's webinar, the webinar is on monitoring the security agencies in their conduct as they are deployed to regulate, control citizens for the lockdown, manage the goods and services, and basically in quarantine and helping the health services. So we're going to see how these are panning out in terms of the accountability oversights that have been put in place, whether by civil society or by governments, and how these are unfolding over time. I'm not going to take much time. I'm going to pass on the baton to Blessing Avery, who from Clean Foundation. Actually, she wears 2 hats. She's also been working with the Afro-Asian Association. So she's a member with us and also with the Clean Foundation. So she has the organizational history of both organizations, and she's going to take us through our discussions today. Just a few short housekeeping rules, requests, which I think most of us are very familiar with in the virtual world which we are living in these days. Please do keep your audios on mute. I can still hear some noises, so I'm not sure whether that's my computer or somebody else. So please do keep your audios mute, and where possible, do use your video, especially when you're speaking, so that we can have a better connect with each other. And there is a chat box here on the side. So as the presentations are going on, or whatever comments, questions, concerns, issues you want to raise, please type them into the chat box, and Blessing will either call you out or share your concerns for the relevant speakers. Blessing, over to you now.
Hello, Renuka, and everyone. Thank you very much for holding forth. I'm happy you've also tried to establish the challenges that we may have in the course of conducting this webinar series. So please, our panelists and our participants, kindly bear with us. I'll join Renuka to thank each and every one of you for making our time to be with us today. We know you all have busy schedules, but given the importance of the issues and times we're in, it is necessary to look at critical issues that are affecting us. So as Renuka has clearly established, we are going to be looking at some of the monitoring strategies or innovations that various CSOs and other groups have come up with. This particular webinar is a follow-up to a previous one which we had that was geared towards looking at rights approach in pandemic policing. And some critical issues that came out from that recommendations that were made from that webinar series was the need for us to have strong oversight and policing institutions to deal with human rights violations that are coming forth in these times. And also in all of these, the pivotal role that CSOs play in ensuring that there's adequate and systemic documentation of the rights violations, and also working very closely with the oversight institutions to ensure that these violations are monitored they are investigated, and those who are found culpable are brought to justice. So at this point, I'll be moving very quickly. As Renuka has clearly indicated, we have varied panelists from both Africa and Asia with vast experience on the issues that we'll be talking about. So I'll quickly start from our continent, so to speak. I'll be moving to South Africa, and I'll be inviting Mr. Galib Gallant, who is the Deputy National Coordinator of the Right to Know campaign in South Africa, to quickly, in brief minutes, share with us what's the experience in South Africa so far, what are the initiatives and innovations that they have put in place to monitor the conduct and activities of security and law enforcement agencies. Also looking at how are the information that they are getting being verified, processed, managed, and fed with the relevant oversight agencies, so that justice is done, investigations are done, and when we have some form of feedback on what is going on in that region. So if Mr. Galib Gallant is with us, I would quickly pass over the mic to him. Hello.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, I am here.
Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity also just to share what we've been trying to do for the past 2 months. Colleagues will be aware that South Africa went into a national lockdown on the 26th of March. And that included restricting the movement of everybody across the country. In some other African countries, we've had partial bits of the city, like in Nairobi, certain suburbs locked down and movement limited. But in South Africa, that was across the board. We also deployed our army for the first time in 25 years as a peacekeeping, in a peacekeeping role to support the police. And the problem with that was that what was foregrounded was the enforcement of the lockdown and the regulations. So for the first time in 25 years of democracy in South Africa, we had our army and all of their machinery on our civilian streets again. Also in that first week of the lockdown, there were a number of civilian deaths caused by security personnel, SAPS, the South African Police Service, but also the army members who it seems like didn't quite understand what their policing role was. So we had quite a repressive response from government, very much an enforcement of regulations, keeping people virtually incarcerated, I guess, across the country. As civil society actors then, and many of us working in the area of repression and securitization, etc., it was really important that there be some kind of civilian response to that. But of course, the challenge was that civilians were being forced to stay home. And so only essential services workers were permitted to move, and even that was very restricted. So what I think was really amazing was that our one Chapter 9 institution, one national human rights institution, the Human Rights Commission, stepped in to that particular breach and used its empowering legislation to form an advisory committee. But that advisory committee has now grown to be something like 400 or 500 civilian monitors across the country. And they've been accorded essential services status, which has allowed us to be able to put boots on the ground and eyes on the ground, more particularly, to observe the sort of security overreaches. And so I think that's maybe one thing to celebrate, is that a national human rights institution stepped in quite creatively, using some of its powers under our constitution to also push back in this very extraordinary situation. But it's also been quite an interesting experiment in how civil society and all of the challenges that we face within civil society, fractures, competition, etc., how so many organizations have been able to come together, from grassroots organizations, advice officers in quite remote rural parts of the country, through to very blue chip technical NGOs, have been able to come together to perform this monitoring function. Maybe two other things to say then. But the architecture then that we've put in place is the monitoring by these monitors under the umbrella of the Human Rights Commission. We've created an online web platform where reports of incidents can be logged by anybody, not even just the monitors, and then monitoring reports as well about repression, corruption, and general human rights violations as well. And so we're also seeing that there are the social impact of a lockdown has led to a spike, for example, in gender-based violence and domestic violence, because home is not necessarily a safe place under these conditions. So unintended consequences also of the lockdown, we've been able to track and respond to. And so the third part of that architecture is then rapid response. So putting in place legal networks, humanitarian assistance networks as well, and hotlines to various oversight bodies, the police oversight body, the military ombud, various Chapter 9 constitutional bodies that we also have. But being able to have quite a quick through flow of information from the registering of a case through to referral to an appropriate agency to pick up on the matter. So that's the architecture, the broad. It's not without its challenges, of course, and we've also attempted to make that localized. It's been interesting that so we've had to use some technological infrastructure, of course. So we've created sort of Google Forms and some hotlines that can feed into a virtual platform. But it really is the analog people on the ground, the eyes on the ground, that are able to get the information and feed that through. That's the real critical piece in this. And so the protection afforded by the Section 11 committee status is a really important protection for our observers, civilian observers. Maybe just to say that, so there's rapid response, but there's also been a response at a policy level. So because of the information that's coming up from the ground, we've also been able to engage with this new structure, the National Council. This is an executive structure of several cabinet ministers, to try and influence also the regulations as they are being promulgated, and creating that particular linkage has been quite critical, and has seen the watering down of a number of the regulations, the introduction of a staged upliftment of the lockdown, for example, recrafting of regulations as well. And so that partnership, I guess, between the executive and civil society has also been, I think, quite important in mitigating some of the impacts. Maybe one last thing to say is that South Africa's come out of 8 or 9 years of securocratic influence at the executive level. And so the hold that the securocrats have over South Africa is still very strong. And you can see it in the attitude of our military, for example.
Hi, can I just request all to put the audios? Yeah, on mute. Thank you. We're getting lots of music also now.
And so just to say that we have the that the influence of the securocrats is still very strong. And this has been a really important step for us to be able to push back against that influence. Thank you.
Thank you very much for, first of all, for keeping within time, Mr. Gallant, and also for that very detailed presentation. It's very interesting to see that from a South African perspective, there has been a very coordinated effort to have a coordinated approach to dealing with these issues. As listening to you, you were saying that the civil society, instead of working in silos, have come together to work together to achieve these results. Because part of what we always see is that everyone is doing their own thing in different quarters, and there's that coordinated approach is missing. And that has also been helpful, as you've explained, to also see reflection in changes in policies being coming out from the parliament in terms of dealing with issues around the pandemic. So that's very, very interesting to learn. Thank you very much. But I see there are some questions. I think Renuka has one for you. And she's asking that, are the human rights organizations or the commission facing any backlash control from security agencies? There's also another one from Julie, do you have women human rights defenders monitoring state security agencies' responses during the pandemic? Have they faced any persecution? So it's issue of backlash. How has that come out, and how are you dealing with it, if at all? Over to you, Mr. Ghana. It appears we can't hear you.
I'm muted, sorry.
Oh.
I've unmuted myself. In the city of Cape Town, there's in fact been a court challenge to the monitors, where the city of Cape Town has taken the Human Rights Commission and 8 of the monitors who were doing monitoring of a safety site that the city had rolled out for homeless people, for example, and really reporting on the lack of service provision, etc. So the city took the rather bold step of taking the commission to court, and that matter is still before our courts. In essence, challenging the commission on its ability to deploy a Section 11 committee to use its powers. So that's an example of the backlash that some of the monitors have faced. It's not been all moonlight and roses. It's an extreme form, and I think also as monitors, as civil society, many of the members and the organizations are new to this monitoring role as well. And so there are also missteps along the way. So over the past 2 months, I think we have been challenged to innovate as we go along and to refine our actions as well. I feel confident that the courts will confirm the Human Rights Commission's ability to exercise its powers that's given to it under the Constitution appropriately, and that it will not limit the Section 11 committee powers. But that case is coming before the courts in June. On the women human rights defenders, of course, the gender aspect of this lockdown and state of disaster is something that is front and center for civil society in South Africa. We've seen, we understand that these executive decisions, but also these economic decisions, affect women often much more drastically than men. And so as we've, there's a whole working group in the coalition of civil society organizations just looking at the gendered aspect of COVID-19 and the impact that it has, but also of the lockdown and the impact that it has. As I said, there was a huge spike in reported gender-based violence cases in the first 2 weeks of the lockdown, as people are forced together in often very small, confined spaces. And then the factors that influence gender-based violence come to the fore in those intimate spaces particularly. We've also had a rather curious example of the gender impact is a case where some army officials were taken to court for killing a civilian, actually chasing someone into his home and then shooting him in his home for an apparent breach of the lockdown regulations. The internal hearing had a rather tortured justification for exonerating the 4 army officers. It said that the civilian had challenged the 2 female officers, and then 2 male officers had come to their rescue, had then chased this civilian down and were forced to shoot him. So it was actually the civilian's fault that he got killed, and this rather curious chivalry being shown by the 2 male army officers. So it's a really strange kind of mentality that we're dealing with here in our security personnel.
A very last question before we move on is, how are you dealing with the issue of funding? Someone is asking of funding for CSO.
So I think 2 months into this coalition that we've formed now, all organizations are there. We've repurposed, I guess, much of our programmatic work, which had to be suspended during the lockdown because people were asked to work from home or stay at home. So for many organizations, we repurposed our budgets and our activities to focus on COVID-19 and lockdown related work. There has been some extraordinary funding from some donors to support the work of CSOs, but it is an extraordinary situation. And so there's also obviously never enough money and never enough resources. The impact of the lockdown, the economic meltdown, is huge. And we're seeing many people losing their jobs, whole industries shutting down, and similarly for the CSOs, it's a very, very fraught situation currently. The needs are increasing, but the resources aren't necessarily there. We're in junk status now economically in South Africa, and so resources generally, I think, are quite tight. It's going to be one of the big questions for us going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallant, for the very detailed insights. Very quickly now, we'll move over to Kenya, and let's hear from Moses Okin, who is the communication officer with the International Commission of Jurists, ICJ Kenya. Is he here, please?
I'm here. Are you getting me?
All right. Yes, Moses, over to you. Very quickly and briefly, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be very, very quick and brief. And one thing I'll say is that this pandemic found human rights organizations not prepared, because I think we saw things happening in Asia. We saw lockdowns happening all over the world, But as Africans, I don't think we were adequately prepared as human rights organizations in terms of the consequences of the pandemic on human rights. In Kenya, since the first day of the curfew, police brutality has been on the increase. In fact, it's a little bit funny. We are discussing technology and COVID-19. And I remember the first day of the curfew, our Kenyan police were very brutal. People were being beaten. And the funny thing is that they were recording, because it was like a coordinated recording of this violence on the people. And then they were sharing it. They were sharing online. It was like something that was coordinated within the police force in order to show or to threaten people that if you're found outside, then this is what will happen. And in fact, at one point, the Kenyan police were rated as they had killed more people than the pandemic itself. There was a point that the Kenyan police had killed more people than the pandemic itself. And nobody was spared. Women, children. We had Jonathan Moya, a very small boy, he was killed on their balcony. So nobody was spared by the police. Women, pregnant women, everybody faced the wrath of the police. And as an organization at ICJ Kenya, we strongly believe in information and communication technology in playing a critical role in sharing of in monitoring of these human rights violations. And one thing that comes to mind about the power of ICT, the power of a mobile phone, is whatever is happening in the US right now, the case of George Floyd. You see, without a mobile phone, the story might have been different. So this is something that as an organization, we take really, really very seriously. And we work in collaboration with different organizations. One of the things we do is the use of social media. We do use a lot of social media where we encourage citizen journalism, whereby enabling activists, enabling the public to directly report some of these violations. We don't work alone. We work with the Independent Police Oversight Authority. We work with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. We are part of the National Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms. So these are just some of the organizations that as ICJ Kenya we work with in order to make work easy in bringing out, documenting these human rights violations. We do also have, as ICJ Kenya, a network of paralegals. In fact, just after the pandemic, we trained them on documenting and reporting these human rights violations. The paralegals are spread within the country in 6 regions within the country. So they are trained. They do have a way that they do report to us. In terms of, we also do have a toll-free line where we are working, not alone, working with Katiba Institute, with Kerin International and other organizations, where we do have toll-free lines and toll-free message service, whereby if anybody has been abused or has witnessed a rights or a violation happening, they can be able to directly and freely contact us for action. We have also, since the pandemic began, we have had quite a number of webinars where we have been interrogating the situation in the country, interrogating human rights violation in the country, interrogating police brutality, interrogating the detention centers, because at one point it was like having COVID was criminalized, or being a suspect of having this illness was criminalized. So you were arrested, you were sent to detention. So we tried as much as possible to work with authorities to ensure that it's a disease, yes, but we are human beings. So if anybody is suspected of having COVID, they should be treated first as a human being. And so we have been having a series of these webinars to discuss some of these issues and to make recommendations to the judiciary, to make recommendations to the police, to make recommendations to the authorities. And we have seen it working. We saw the president apologize for the violence that the police were making on the people. The violence is still ongoing, but at least we have seen it has reduced. We do also have a platform with other organizations, which we are calling the Missing Voices platform. This is where we are looking at issues of police killings, issues of enforced disappearance. So people can be able to directly link to the website and post whatever violations, whatever disappearances that are there. So we do also have figures that we post there. So as we do our monitoring, we have faced some challenges, and like I said when I began, is that we were caught unawares as civil society organizations, and there's also the issue of the closing civic space. There's the issue of funding, and there's also the issue of, as we document these violations, there's the issue of invasion of privacy, issues of intimidation to violence by the police, issues of threats to violence to victims and witnesses. Personally, I've been a victim of police violence, in fact, of police threats, which I managed to document. Way forward, I think that what we need to do as civil society organizations in Africa, whereby we are facing a lot of funding challenges, is to have joint initiatives as civil society organizations, as opposed to having, as opposed to organizations working individually, like ICJ working individually, another organization working individually. So if we have joint initiatives, like now this forum that we're having, it will make it easier for us to manage, to monitor, to document, and to highlight these issues. Because I believe the capacities of different organizations are not, the capacities are different. Another thing I think could be as a way forward in terms of monitoring and in terms of enhancing our IT capacities as organizations, is that mostly as CSOs within Africa, we rely a lot on donor fundings. We rely a lot, almost totally, on donor fundings. And we do have this, so many in Kenya. We have Safaricom, one of the largest, most profitable companies in Kenya. It's the high time we start directly working with private enterprises, blue chip companies, to help us. We have Microsoft, we have high-tech companies to help us in our human rights fight, to come up with the AI solutions that will be of the benefit of the community. Otherwise, I think I'm always very fast. I'm a writer by profession, so I talk less and write more. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Moses. That was definitely within time. But I see it's interesting, like you've said, and I agree with you that we need to start looking inward in terms of so indigenous support towards human rights work. Of course, the same way when we come out from the pandemic, we don't know what's going to expect. Donors are also going to be facing a lot of all of these challenges. We see what is happening with the oil sector. And so it's not going to be any different from the donor support. So I think it's important, like you said, going forward for us to begin to look inwards. I see there is one or two questions here for you, which would appreciate you to quickly take before we move on. Renuka is asking that, Moses, how has your work affected the procedures, processes, conduct of security agencies?
I was just wondering, Moses, Moses, you said there were a number of recommendations which you've been making to the judiciary, and having webinars and collating documentations. And so has there been any analysis of the work which you've been doing? And if you have been able to reach out to the security agencies, and if they have been able to organize themselves according to the voices of the citizens?
Hello, okay, yeah, you had muted yourself.
Yeah, no, okay. So how was the work has affected procedures? We did publish as ICJ Kenya, with other organizations, we did publish police guidelines on how they should work during the pandemic. And since the first time, because we managed to, like I said before, we don't work in isolation. We work with the Independent Police Oversight Authority, we work with the International Affairs Unit, we work with the DCI, Criminal Investigation Department. So we managed to share this to help them develop these procedures, which we published in both national newspapers and on social media. And from that time, like I said before, we have seen the violence reduce. It's not like it was at the first instance. So these procedures were discussed, these procedures were developed in the collaboration with other organizations, and they were published, and we can see some minimal results. Working with the police is not the easiest of things. What they say now is not what they normally do, but we keep on pushing. In terms of analysis from the responses, we have seen analysis from the responses. Just on Tuesday, we had another webinar on people in detention. And the result, you see that from the Committee on Administrative Justice, you've seen they're coming up with a toll-free number where prisoners can also reach out to human rights organizations. So we have not done a proper analysis of all the work that we have done within this pandemic, but you can see some. If we do some small analysis, you can be able to see some results. And this is because whenever we are doing this, we ensure that everybody is represented. Yes, we blame the police, but we try as much as possible to ensure the police are represented, to ensure the prisons they are represented. If it's something that has to do with prisons, to ensure that the judiciary is represented, to ensure that everybody is represented within the webinars that we've been having. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moses, for that very deep insight. Very quickly now, we'll move over to Nigeria, and I'll be calling on my colleagues, Gabriel Akinremi, to walk us through what Clean Foundation has been doing. Interestingly for us in Clean, we have all been leveraging more on technology and to monitor the conduct and activities of security agencies. So he'll be walking us through with the support of another colleague, Oluwole Ojewale, who will be giving us some more insights on how the findings and data we're generating from the technology and app being used is feeding into the works of the oversight agencies here in Nigeria. So Gabriel, very quickly, please, over to you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Gabriel. I just want to brief about Clean Foundation.
Gabriel, we can't hear you very clearly.
Gabriel, you're not audible, please.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Okay. Yeah, my name is Gabriel Akinremi. I work with Clean as Senior Information Technology Officer, and I would like to give a brief introduction about Clean Foundation. We promote public safety, security, accessible justice through the strategies of empirical research, legislative advocacy, demonstration of programs, and publication in partnership with government, civil society, and private sector. Now, the name of the technology which we are using here in Nigeria is called Teller. Teller is a mobile app, and we use Teller to document, issues that has to do with human rights violation, public compliance with government directive, and conduct of security personnel on enforcement of government directive. This mobile app allows collection of data for research, advocacy, and legal proceeding. One of the good key issues that we do, that methods we use in collecting the data is, we collect, the app enable us to collect the data, okay, and it also helps us to document the events that happen within the locality. I also want to tell us that we are doing this in all the local governments in Nigeria, okay, and we have volunteers across the state. Now, the app also enables us to analyze all of these data that are collected. Okay, so these are the main three features of the app. Okay, we use the app, to collect data through a form that has ability to attach photos, videos, and audio files. The app has some form of security, okay, that one can use to, lock and unlock the app so that an external person, such as hacker or spammers, cannot, have access to the app. And one other thing about the app is that you can use the app to verify where the data are coming from, a kind of evidence to cross-check with other facts known about the event or about the area where such event is coming from. The app is accessible. We have it on Google Play Store. We also have it on our website, so people can go there to download, especially the volunteers across the local government in Nigeria. So we can actually go to the Google Play Store to type this app out, then we'll be able to connect. This is the analysis of report we have been able to gather from the app starting from 1st of April to 24th of May. I now hand over to my colleague Uluwole to give us the analysis of the report.
Thank you, Gabriel. I hope Wale is on ground to take up from there. Hello, Wale. All right.
Hello.
All right, go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you so much. Gabriel has significantly narrated what the app is all about and what we are trying to achieve with the app. And I will just take over from where he ended, and by starting to say what we have discovered in Nigeria in the face of this COVID-19 pandemic is the fact that we have a security institution, we have law enforcement agencies that were never prepared for this kind of experience. So what translated into the policing of the pandemic is just the regular experience of day-to-day policing, which necessarily does not encourage the same methodology of policing that we've been having. And that is what informed the activities that Clean have put together in terms of our responses and what we have been able to generate through the data that we've been able to gather through our Teller app. Like Gabriel said, we have volunteers across the 774 local governments in Nigeria, the 36 states of the Federation, including the FCT. So we work across all the locations to monitor the police conduct and professionalism in terms of enforcing the various lockdown of the national and the subnational government in Nigeria, because as the federal government was issuing orders, state government were also doing the same. So we uploaded 3 forms into the Teller app that Gabriel just discussed, and the issues that we monitored include human rights violations. We also monitor public compliance to government directives as far as COVID-19 lockdown enforcement is concerned. And then we also look at conduct of security personnel on enforcement duty as far as the government directives are concerned. So in terms of human rights violation, COVID-19, actually we reported, the report of the first of the index case was around February 27, I think. And then government moved into action subsequently, probably about 2 weeks after, in terms of contact basic public health methodology to address the issues. The real enforcement and the rolling out of the police and security agents actually started maybe sometimes in March. So far, counting from that date, we have received 302 incidents of human rights violations. And then on issues relating to public compliance to government directives, where people have to actually make specific video, audio evidences. We have also reported other pictorial evidences. We have received 1,316 reports. And in terms of incidents related to conduct of security personnel on enforcement of COVID-19 lockdown directives of the various governments, we have also received reports with evidence in terms of the conduct of security personnel. We've received 676 reports on that note. And then we have also process that and try to actually disaggregate the data. So what we have found out in terms of our key findings is that of all the reports that we have received in terms of human rights violation, 23.6% of the reports are related to extortion. And in this time, we're talking about financial extortion, One of the key findings that we have also noted regarding this, and by extension, how this is undermining the lockdown directive of the government in Nigeria, is the fact that it has become an industry kind of now, in the sense that the interstate movement, intracity travel movement are supposed to be, restriction related to that are supposed to be enforced by the police. So you have a situation whereby the experience that I narrated earlier in terms of the regular policing and the unprofessional conduct that has gone with it over the years, the same has been carried over by the law enforcement agent in terms of policing this pandemic. And what has played out is that we are now have high reportage of low-level corruption among the security agents. In other words, people can pay their way to move from one place to another, and that is what we regard as extortion here. And then we also have 15.1% of the incident relating to intimidation on the part of police and security, other law enforcement and other security agents. We also have about 13.1% in terms of physical assault. We also have incident of unlawful arrest. We've also, that is about 6.5%. About 6% of the reports we have received also dovetail into torture. And then, like our Kenyan counterpart spoke, at some point, police had killed more persons than COVID-19 had killed in the country, particularly in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the lockdown, first 2 weeks of the lockdown enforcement. So we've had about 2.96% of this incident relating to extrajudicial killing. So those are the key findings that we've had here. And then I want to quickly go to other issues here. So we also have conduct of security personnel, where some of the reports that we have received indicate that the security personnel, you know, what we have also realized, and I'm going to anchor on this, is the fact that like I said, that the required methodology for policing the pandemic ought to be different from the regular policing. So we have a situation whereby even the fundamental human rights, the rights to life of the police officers themselves, were not being upheld by the institution. What do I mean by that? You have a situation whereby people were going into the field to go and enforce the lockdown directives, and they are not properly catered in terms of the PPE requirement to be able to discharge the duty. So for us in Clean Foundation, we also see this as an infringement into the fundamental human right of the law enforcement officers themselves. In this regard, I'm talking to their right to life. So we found out that about 36.9% of the samples that we have received in terms of deployment of the police officers to enforce the lockdown directive, we realized that they were not kitted at all in terms of wearing face masks or wearing other required gadgets to be able to do the work and safeguard their own lives. So what have we done with this data? We work with the oversight agencies like Police Service Commission, the National Human Rights Commission, and escalate these reports to whatever they are doing. And I can tell you that a series of inquiries have been conducted, and then in the whole process, some officers have been disciplined, while in fact there have been summary dismissal of some officers, and then other institutional mechanisms that have been put in place to enforce to ensure that discipline is met out to anybody that has gone against the professional ethics of the security agent, whether it is the police or the army that has been involved in this. Proper justice is seen to be served. So we have leveraged technology to crowdsource information across board and provide the necessary support. And use that to be a form of evidence that oversight agencies and the police institutions themselves, the law enforcement agents, can use to ensure that fundamental human rights of the citizens are not being been eroded as a result of this pandemic experience that we're having in Nigeria. We've had pockets of experiences that are very sad in terms of what the citizens have had to go through. But as a civil society organization, we have positioned ourselves to be the voice of the people. And we are doing that to leverage on available technology and then also working with the relevant institutions to make sure that the human rights of the people are upheld in the midst of this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wole, for your detailed Wole and Gabriel for the detailed presentation. I see that, someone popped in. Okay, I think we'll take the question later, but it's for our Kenyan counterpart. So I see there's no question here for you. So we'll quickly move on to India now. Getting a different perspective. I think in the last three speakers have talked about various collaborations, partnerships they've been involved in, and the deployment of technology. But I think we'll get the perspective of India as we'll be calling in Professor Avi Tiwari. I hope I got that correctly. He's the Dean School of Law, Rights and Constitutional Governance at the Mumbai campus, and also chairperson of the Center for Police Studies and Public Security School of Law. Professor Tiwari, we welcome you. Over to you now. Professor Tiwari, are you with us? I see that he may not be there. Renuka, you're muted. We can't hear you. Oh, okay.
Blessing, he was there. Let me try and just get him in. Why don't we go to the question for Moses? Yeah.
Okay, all right. So maybe while we wait for him to quickly set up or attend to the glitch. So now,
hello, Blessing.
Oh, okay. Oh, he's up. All right. Then.
Blessing.
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? This is Arvind Tiwari.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Good afternoon to all of you. Yeah.
Yes. Over to you, please.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I would talk about the policing in pandemic, and particularly the situation after this lockdown, and what is the accountability mechanisms for police in India in regular way and also during this pandemic period. Now, if India has declared, the government of India lockdown on 4th March 2020, and the national lockdown announced by the union government. Now you know that 1.3 billion people we have, and the police role primarily, according to the Police Act, is that to maintain and also to prevent the crime and do the investigation of cases. Now this pandemic period, the police has played a very significant role, and also like in public health. The role of police in public health was never seen in India as we have seen now during the COVID-19 period. And the police has collaborated with the municipal authorities, with the health authorities, and with the local agencies to not only to maintain the public order, but also to do the public service. So the social policing aspect, food distribution of medicines to the needy people, attending the senior citizens, and also helping the health worker to go for the to the communities and do the screening. So this aspect of police, social aspect, is significant, which we have seen in the COVID-19 period. Now, if you'll see the police public ratio in India, it is around 193 to 100,000 a population. So that means it is very low. The budget of police, if you'll see 80 to 90% budget of the policing goes to the salaries, to pay the salaries of the police personnel. Now, if we'll see how accountability mechanism, because the main topic of today is the how, whether the police, what are the accountability mechanisms in India? You know, India, we have the federal police and we have the state police. So police generally, which is dealing with the people, comes under the state government purview. And we have the mechanism, regular mechanism, like external accountability mechanism. Executive. Police is accountable to the executive, to the government, to the state. The judiciary is very proactive in the country. The Supreme Court and the High Court and the other lower judiciary also is very proactive. And then the legislature. And the Police Act, particularly the police reform started in India in a very different manner after 2006. There was a Supreme Court judgment in which has said that the police should be reformed in India and the new act of the police should be enacted by the state government. Now, the act had been enacted by several governments, almost all governments, or amended by the government. But still there are some issues, but things are little changing. But beside this, also there are other oversight mechanisms like human rights commissions, state human rights commissions, and at the national level we have the National Human Rights Commission. Then there are various other kind of human rights institutions also, like Women Commission, Child Rights Commission, Commission for Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes, and various for various stakeholders. The commissions are there. Now we have very strong media, and media, particularly the electronic media, the print media, the social media, is also reporting the violation or if the police is doing any kind of atrocity, that is also being promptly reported, and that is being done addressed by the establishment. Now, regarding technology and policing, briefly I'll focus that after COVID-19, Government of India had MHA has set up a control room in Delhi, and the toll-free number 1930 has been given, in which can attend the complaints from any individuals or organization regarding this issue and the support to be required. Then the toll-free number was also created to the northeastern state, particularly in India. The northeastern states are a little far away from the mainstream of Delhi. So separate number 1944 is allocated to these states. Dial 100 is also a regular kind of mechanism in the police, which is also being attended by the police. And also, like for example, UP has created the Dial 100 app, and many other states also, website, SMS, through WhatsApp. And then also, you see, CCTV has been put up in the cities and the police stations according to Supreme Court order. All custodial institution and the police station must have CCTV. So that is also one of the mechanisms. Then National Emergency Response System number 112 is also there, which integrate the various kind of services, fire services, medical services, police service, and other kind of services. And CCTNS, Crime Criminal Tracking Network System, is also created by the MHA, by the Ministry of Home Affairs, which also put around 94% of police stations are connected, and all FIR and other things are being put in this system. So it is the centralized kind of system. Now, the role of police during COVID time, you see, like rule of law. One way they are supposed to handle the situation on the ground, because the government, national and the state government had declared curfew. Curfew means nobody should be seen on the street. And also they have relaxed the curfew during daytime, and section 144 means that more than 5 people should not assemble in one place. But many times the rule of law is not followed by the people. People themselves are violating sometimes. So I would like to say that the police role and the police face, there are some aberrations where police atrocities and police violations have also been highlighted by social media, electronic media. But also there are some incidences where, like in Punjab, the police party was attacked by the people, those who are going into the vegetable market, and the hands were chopped off of one of the assistant sub-inspector. And in many places, police people were attacked by the public because they were helping the municipal authorities or the health authorities. So the challenges which the police has got also we have to discuss. And finally, you see the crisis resilience. If we'll see that this is a very, very critical kind of situation, which none of us in any part of the world has seen. Now, police role, because if you'll see the police training, particularly the police training, particularly police training is divided in two parts, soft skill and hard skill. Soft skills like negotiation skill, how communication skill, and how crowd management, mob management. So these are actually for the lower run functionaries, much attention is not being given. There is a need to reorient and also reimagine the training. So that, because now, if we will see in India, the scenario is very different. Around 70 to 80% of our constables we say the lower rank functionary, those who are entering into the police service, they are graduate and above. So the era is changed now. Now there is a need that the training should be changed. Things are being done in some of the training centers, but still there is a need. That second thing is that the democratization in the police force is also required. And third thing is this, that the community-oriented policing, because the law, even the new act, which had been enacted after the Supreme Court verdict, so the people, the police is not accountable to the citizen. This is the major drawback in the police system still, that they are accountable to the state, they are accountable to the political masters, they should be also accountable to the state, but also the community policing. Although we have experimented all the states, some or other kind of community policing, and very successful experiments are there in each state, but still that is not integrated within the performance system of the police. So if tomorrow a police personnel have to be promoted, or their accountability has to be fixed, or their performance has to be measured, these things are not being taken care of. Now, few things are also happening, like in the country. Very recently, Ministry of Home Affairs has constituted one committee to reform the criminal law, and this committee is undergoing. So several committees earlier have also been set up to look into the functioning of the criminal justice, and particularly with the police. So the technology interface with the police, each state is having a lot of interface with the social media, with the dial 100. But the response time, as being claimed by the police, is that around half an hour in the rural areas and 15 minutes in the urban areas. But that has to be tested through empirical studies by the academic institutions, by the civil society organizations. Civil society organizations are also monitoring, and many times they are also sending the complaint to the human rights institution. They are going to the court, they are going to the police hierarchy and highlighting the violation of human rights. So many of these complaints are also being heard, and action is being taken. There is a need, but I'll say that India is a huge country, and we have both kind of mechanism: the external accountability mechanism and the internal mechanism are also there within the police department. That the senior hierarchy is also looking into the perspective that how if there is any violation of by the police personnel, the lower police personnel, that should be taken care of and action should be taken. Departmental disciplinary committee or inquiry has to be constituted. Some action has to be taken. Another measure which is not fully successful in our country, but is very good measure which came after the judgment of the Supreme Court, that the police complaint authority, each state must have police complaint authority at the district level and at the state level. And if there is any complaint against the police personnel, these complaint authorities should address. But many states are not having the functional kind of police complaint authorities. So civil society organization have been raising the voice that sometimes members are not appointed, sometimes infrastructure is not there. So therefore, the mechanism, if I'll say, are there, and the accountability to the law, rule of law, and the law of the land is there. But sometimes, because these accountability mechanisms are not so strong, the violations are happening. But still, during the time of COVID, like the police, I would say that in India has done wonderful job, that they have helped the people like migrant workers. Several thousands of workers have migrated from one city to another city. Although there are some incidences where the violation is also reported, because the police has been asked that they should not allowed to go across the border of the each state, one state to another state. So these are the difficulties. But I would say that the social policing aspect, and particularly looking into the sustainable development goals, now the police and criminal justice system is also being slowly integrated with the development planning. And this is seen, otherwise police was seen at the law enforcement agencies.
One more
Yeah,
minute, please.
yeah. So police was seen that only the law enforcement agencies, and but now it is also being part of the development planning. And like smart policing also they have started in country. But smart police means they have said the police should be sensitive, accountable, responsive, technology oriented, and training should be strengthened, etc. So these things are, you see, a lot of narratives is going on, and a lot of framework has been put up to humanize the police. And police is still being humanized in the country. And because we also conduct training for senior officers, there are both kind of things. Many officers are so willing to take up the issues. Some of the officers have still, they have to imbibe that kind of culture. So what I would like to say, that during the time of the COVID, the accountability of the police, although we have already some mechanisms, but also during this time, the electronic media and the social media has also played a role, and community CSOs have also played role. And I think the new aspect of policing, the social policing, is started in the country. And perhaps we have to build upon this and see that's how police is being humanized. And also they are being made more accountable to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tiwari. It's very interesting, the various perspectives you brought to the discussion. And like I said, we should all be thinking towards the future, that with COVID, praying and hoping that COVID passes as quickly as possible. But this presents opportunities for us to gain from the learnings that have been deployed at this time and see how to build on it in terms of improving critical areas for police accountability. So the issue which you've raised critically on the need to have functional oversight agencies for the police cannot be overemphasized. And so we hope that India will take the learnings from all that has happened and where the gaps are, and critically work on them to ensure that there is that missing link is filled in terms of response to accountability. So thank you very much. But I see there are a few questions here. Renuka was asking specifically for you that how has civil society engaged as an oversight in India?
Yeah, you see the civil society, only a few organizations are engaged with the oversight mechanisms. In India, we are lacking in this field, that many civil society organizations, although they can highlight that these are dysfunctional, not doing well, but you see, still the engagement of the civil society with these kind of system and how to reform the system is not very intensive. So there is a need that the CSOs must also focus on this, that how these mechanisms should be strengthened.
Thank you very much. There's a question on public perception of the police, particularly as it relates to handling of foreigners in these times. We've seen a lot of media footages, social media on the responses to foreigners in India at this time. So could you shed some light on all of this? So there's a question that is coming from one of our participants. Thank you.
What I would like to say, that you see, there are both kind of thing, that it is not that you see always the police is against the foreigners, or they are particularly they are insensitive. But sometime, somewhere it could happen. And therefore I said that when the smart police concept is being initiated by the government, that has to be a culture. The subculture of policing has to be changed. And slowly it is happening. But we have to travel a long journey, and we have to engage the civil society organizations, because civil society organization produce a lot of material. If you see the training, because I have been engaged with the police training at various levels, and I have seen the training material which is being given to the trainees, particularly at the cutting edge level, which are those who are working with the direct contact with the public, is outdated. So there is a need that we have to engage with them, academic institutions, the NGOs, the case studies, and perhaps this would bring the more kind of human face of the police.
Thank you very much, Professor Tiwari, for your insights. We have just one more question for, not for you now, for Moses.
Oh.
We switch over back to Kenya. I hope he's still with us.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm here.
Yeah. There was a question from Kumar who was asking that it's Kenya's government providing the public with timely, accurate, and accessible information on the spread of the pandemic.
In terms of providing timely information, I think the government has tried. They do have daily press briefings, which are covered live. In terms of the information being accurate, I'm not sure. But one thing we accept is that the daily briefings are good, yes. But the only issue we have is when it comes to questions on how they are spending money that is budgeted for fighting the pandemic. That's where there's an issue. And in fact, as an organization, from tomorrow, we have a radio campaign whereby we are going to educate the people on what questions they need to ask in terms of the money meant for the pandemic. But in terms of the numbers of people infected, the numbers of deaths, they have been quite accurate. The only problem we have is now when it comes to finances, which is quite usual in Africa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moses.
Can I make a small point? A small point?
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, yeah. We have been discussing with Professor Renuka regarding the access to justice course, because in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, we have 1 year LLM course in access to justice. And we are training the lawyers that how the access to justice could be made functional. So we are also, you see, having discussion with the Professor Renuka, and perhaps he'll come back to all of you, or she may have engaged already with this discussion. So we would like to devise a course on access to justice through online, and also maybe the full-fledged kind of course. And I'm looking forward that, I mean, if you all would be little open to this idea, we would be taking it forward.
Thank you very much. We'll be looking forward to the invitation to be part of that work. Okay. I think as a wrap-up question for me, generally, I think this goes to all our panelists who have spoken today. Excellent work you're all doing in your countries, and there's so much to learn. We have learned quite a lot today. But a question from me would be that, by way of reflection, looking into the future, the prayer is that the pandemic blows over as soon as possible. Well, we've deployed so many strategies, whether through technology or otherwise, to deal with the issue as we find ourselves in now. And so the question is that, looking at what you have and the approaches to how would you say that there are I know you raised some issues of challenges, but what are the critical issues that you think need to be improved upon, knowing that police accountability remains a critical issue, that even after the pandemic, there needs to be that constant monitoring to ensure that we get where we want to get to in terms of ensuring accountability. And so the various initiatives that we have all deployed at this time, how are we going to consider to improve on them going forward beyond the pandemic? So anyone can take a shot at the question and give us your thoughts. 1 minute, quickly. Hello?
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Can I come in? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
What I feel that now we have to conduct some kind of empirical studies, independent kind of studies. For example, like how the police has handled the situation, particularly like in India, the laborers when they were crossing one state to another state, or other kind of, you see, maintenance of law and order, and what kind of aberration, what kind of violations have happened, and how those violations can be addressed through the institutional mechanisms and the according to the law of the land, so that we can, if we can compile this and some case studies can be prepared, which could be useful to not only to the CSOs and academic institutions, but also to the police organizations, which can take up those issues with the police training, with the change of subculture, and some kind of intervention while humanizing the police force.
Thank you very much for your perspective on that, Professor Tiwari. I'd like to also hear from Moses, Wale, and also Galib, if they're still here with us.
This is Moses. Can I go next? Yes, in fact, I saw a question from somebody on what the civil society is doing in terms of enhancing something like that from Georgia Nyona. And one thing I'd like to say is that we believe now that it's a high time that we take care of individual responsibility for these policemen, so that you be individually responsible for your actions, because I believe the Constitution allows us to do that. And we have seen a number of policemen arrested. We have supported the prosecution of several policemen. There are several cases that we will be filing soon in court, public interest litigation cases. So we are working towards that. So whatever evidence we are gathering, whatever monitoring we are doing, we are not doing them in vain. We are trying to secure this. One thing I'd also like to mention is for what we need to do to enhance our capabilities. I think we need to an enhanced collaboration between the different civil society organization players in terms of monitoring. Because I believe sometimes we become selfish, we want to work individually. We are all human rights organizations, and all that we need is to protect and promote human rights. We need to enhance our monitoring in order to achieve this. And then I think I've also mentioned the issue of accountability for individual policemen. I think that's what I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Moses. We have very quickly Galib here. Just quickly, Wale. Yes.
So I guess for me, the issue really is about after the pandemic, how has the world shifted, both from an enforcement perspective, but also as civil society, how we work and respond to a new landscape. One of the things that has really concerned us here in South Africa is that the approach from our enforcement agencies has been about enforcement rather than countering a health crisis or a health pandemic. And so when the army has been deployed, it hasn't been on a humanitarian basis, but rather on a policing or enforcement basis. And shifting that particular mindset is really quite critical in the long term as well. So that's really, I think, what we're wanting to see going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. I think just to say a very big thank you to all our panelists. Please keep all your notes because the information. Oh, okay, Wale is here. Maybe
yes,
we'll take his comment in 1 minute.
Okay, I would say basically that.
Go ahead.
Knowing fully well that we didn't fully prepare as a country, as an institution, as a system for this pandemic, it's important that when it will be over, even though we don't know how soon that is going to be, that we hold the same conversation forward and then ensure that we do not allow this to quickly slip by. Whether you like it or not, just 5 years ago, we dealt with Ebola. And then I think about 20 years ago, there was also SARS, reverse Zika virus, and all kinds of things. And what has come to the front burner is that even though nobody envisaged this, the police and other relevant law enforcement agents, they have significant roles to play as part of the first responder system. So we have, in fact, the success or failure in terms of combating this public health challenge is largely going to be determined by how the security and law enforcement agents handle the matter, because they are on the preventive side in the real sense of it. So we have to be constantly ready. And I'm hankering on this to say disaster policing, what you call pandemic policing, or anything that has to do with a large-scale public health concern like what we are dealing with now. We have to see how we consciously advocate for the mainstreaming of training and preparedness in terms of security component of the whole thing. I'm going to give an example. Nations have national strategy for combating the pandemic. I've read that one of Nigeria, for instance, and I realized that not adequate role is given to the police. So we find ourselves in a situation whereby we realize that the police will have a role to play, even though they've not been prepared for it. So going forward as an organization like Clay Foundation that is working in the area of public safety and security, we will make sure that this is part of our advocacy going forward. And I think it's something that we have to look at even broadly continentally. It's very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wale, Gabriel, Galib, Professor Tawari, and Moses, for this very detailed, enlightening, and interesting session that you gave us quite a lot to chew on today. We'll just appeal that all of your notes for the presentations you made today, please do keep them, because we'll come back to you to have them properly prepared, and then we'll upload them usually on the AfroAsia website, so that at least other people who were not fortunate to be with us today can have access to read up on the issues and presentations and country perspectives that have been presented here today. So I want to say that we should continue to improve on what we're doing. There are a lot of learnings which you have all rightly mentioned here that has come from all the work that we do. And we should find a way of building upon them and scaling up after the pandemic so as to improve police accountability in our respective countries. So at this point, I want to hand over to Renuka for the last words before we leave. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Blessing, for an excellent job. And I'd like to thank all our panelists and our participants for this very engaging conversation. And I'm very happy to see that after these 2-3 months of trying to find our feet, the civil society has dug in deep, is pushing back. We are collaborating, we are doing, there's research coming out, and there's a lot of, we are also moving forward to make sure that the learnings from this era are moving in a broad-based manner to strengthen our interventions in a much more citizen-centric manner. And I'm very happy to see all of this. And I'd also like to invite you for our next session, which is going to be focusing on the right of access to justice for the poor. So we have ICJ Kenya, who will be taking the lead on this. And we're going to see how legal aid, justice, and also the security sector are performing, and what are the gaps in the performance of providing justice to the poor. So thank you all. And we hope to continue this dialogue on the webinars, but also we'll be taking this forward in different projects, and also, as Professor Tiwari mentioned, as courses, and building our own capacities so that we are better equipped to deal with similar situations. Thank you all, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.